Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm James. Now it's been nearly 2 months since I last made a video, and the truth of that is I've simply been quite busy. I've demonstrated at a couple of exhibitions, written a couple of articles, but I've been mostly busy doing work on my bench here. Now sometimes you get into doing something and it just seems that to video it interrupts the flow and takes some of the joy out of doing what needs to be done. So I've been working really hard getting stuff ready for videos that will be forthcoming down the way, that I've just not really stopped to video what I've been working on in the moment. But I'm going to kind of put that right today. I'll show you what I've been working on. I'm going to give you an update on Bexhill West because I'm aware that's not been mentioned for months, so we'll have a look at what's going on there. And I'm going to introduce another project which I know some of you know something about, but hopefully today that will make its kind of public debut. So without further ado, let's get straight onto it and have a look at what I've been working at on my bench. So there's plenty to talk about here. This is some of, but not all of, my progress over the last 8 weeks, and as you can see, much of it is still not finished. I'm trying to get lots of things to the same point of sort of being ready for paint, and then I'm going to do a big batch job of painting. But let's have a look at one or two things in particular and we'll take it from there. Let's start with the subject, or one of the subjects of last time's video, the South Eastern Railway F-Class. So then in my last video, which was the review of the fibre laser machine, you saw me make the chassis for this South Eastern Railway F-Class. And the intention with this was that when I did it, well, I just used it as an example to test the machine out, but the intention was that it would receive a 3D printed body, and that's fine, and it will look alright. But I've been so pleased with the fibre laser machine, I've decided that this would be much nicer done in brass. So I'm in the throes of redesigning that, and that will all be done in brass, which I think will make for a nicer job. So that project's not on hold, that's still developing, and I'll share all the artwork and stuff for that when it's complete. Now, I mentioned in that last video that I was working on something special, and if I extract it, here we go. Now anybody who went to either Scale Forum or the recent Uckfield show may well have seen this, so I'll get this out of this little box and we'll take a closer look at it. So I'd mentioned in my last video that I'd try and use that fibre laser machine to come up with something a little bit special, and what I thought I'd have a go at is a breakdown crane. So it's still a work in progress, but hopefully for 8 weeks work, in fact it's a lot less than that, I did most of this in a couple of weeks if I'm honest, but hopefully you'll think I've made sufficient progress. So that's obviously the main chassis, or the main frames for the whole thing. Now at the back of the cow and Shelvin frame are 2 fixed axles, and I've made this little sub-assembly for those. This is sprung, which is quite nice, and there'll be a little bogie that sits in the front. I'm still working on a couple of details for that. But essentially it's going to go together something like that. And what I'll do just for now is I'll prop that there. In fact, let's wedge that up so it's slightly more level. Okay, so that gives you an idea. That's the frame. Now as for the crane itself, this is still very much in pieces. I've got the sort of the main bearing to put in the base of this, which will make it sit nicely, and obviously we've got the boiler and stuff to go on the back, but the crane itself has come together quite well, and I'm hoping that it's all going to kind of work of a fashion. Now at the moment I'm just using some dressmaker's pins and bits of cork to kind of like hold it all together, but essentially the thing, if I just start it off, if I wind it round, hopefully you can see that's the sort of the lifting gear there, that all works, and then this shaft here is the main winding shaft. Now what's quite interesting don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but the gear wheel here, the main sort of gear there, there's another one which spurs onto it. Now I cut those with the fibre laser and they mesh, and strangely they work. I can drive one shaft and wind the hook up with its separate little pulley. So that's all to be worked on, but hopefully I'll get some sort of static shots of this, and hopefully you can see that's coming together, I think, quite well. Now really I would have liked one of the DNS kits for this particular model, but they are like hen's teeth, very expensive to buy second hand, so I've been forced to sort of do it myself, but I'm quite pleased with it. I've tried to keep the loose solder sort of under control, so there's not too much of clean up to do on this before before this sort of goes to the paint shop. But it's coming on, won't be long now before this is ready. The next real task for me is the boiler, which was going to be a 3D print, but I've now decided I'll do it all in brass, and then this will get painted and I can start to assemble it. Of course I've still got the match truck to do, but I've the drawings for those, so that's going to be fine. Now I'm actually going to make two of these. There will be a South Eastern and Chatham Railway one, which had a slightly different match truck, and I'm going to make a Midland version, more of which in just a minute. Next up then is this. It's a South Eastern Railway inspection saloon. Now this is obviously destined for Bexhill West, and this has been made from a kit. I don't believe the kit's available any longer, and I'm quite pleased with it. It's coming together nicely. Still quite a bit of work to do, but this should be a nice, unusual vehicle when it's finished. Now I've been sort of getting into my etched brass work over the past few weeks and thoroughly enjoying putting things like this together, so I'm quite pleased with how that's come together. Not too much in the way of stray solder everywhere, so that's pretty good as far as I'm concerned. So I've enjoyed that one. Now whilst on the subject of southeastern stuff, let's put that to one side and we can revisit these little babies. Now then, a while back I made a video showing me putting together one of these. This is a South Eastern and Chatham Railway 20-ton ballast hopper from 1911. There was another batch made a few years later, but there were 7 of these built originally that made up a little ballast train, and this is my 3D print for it, and it's turned out quite nicely. Now since I made that video I've had lots of people asking me if I would make these available, and I've been not reluctant to, but I've been busy with other things. Well, at the recent Uckfield exhibition I had 3 people badgering me, so I've decided I'm going to do just that. So these will be available. I'll list these on my website shortly. I'll put a link to that in the video description. But one of my reasons for holding back was I thought they would be better as a sprung vehicle. So this is one of the originals, and it's unsprung. I mean, it's fine, but I wanted a sprung one. So I've modified the design, and we now have springing on all 4 corners are sprung, but still to the same basic design. So those will be available. I've not decided what they're going to cost yet, but yeah, check those out on the website. Now I'm going to make those available for kind of like pre-order as of when this video goes live, but the first lot will be dispatched probably early December, probably the first week of December, just to give me a chance to get a gauge for how many people might actually want these things. If you're interested and you don't want to get involved in pre-ordering one, then just send me an email or use the contact form on the website, and I can make sure there's some available for you and let you know when they're in stock for you to sort of order that way. So that's that. They've been I'm quite pleased with these. These have turned out very nicely. Now, as of, these are no good without an appropriate ballast brake, and I've got 2 ballast brake vans that will be available. I'll release these kind of, as I say, 1st of December, and then 1st of January there'll be a choice of ballast brake vans to go with them. But anyway, so I hope that satisfies some people who've been asking me about these. So there are a few of the things I've been working on, and we'll come back to some more in just a moment. But what of Bexhill West itself? It's not been on the channel for ages. What's happened to it? I'm starting to get emails where people are worried that it's not being finished, or have lost interest or moved on or whatever. That's absolutely not the case. Bexhill West remains my prime focus, and I'll make a point of making some constructive progress with it every single day. However, currently it's not kind of set up to make progress on. Now there's a few reasons for that. One of the reasons was that it looked early on in this year that we were likely to move, and so I sort of postponed developing what I was doing so that I'd have the opportunity to have it all set up in a nice building once we've moved. Well, after several false starts, our home move doesn't seem to have happened, and that's been held up. Now it's not really bothered me because that's a project that was always going to take years anyway, and I've been using the time to get rolling stock made and various other little bits and pieces. Now I still don't know whether we are going to move anytime soon, and so I think it's probably unlikely that there'll be significant progress with that over this winter period. Besides, I've got loads of other little things that I'm trying to get done, and my focus really this winter, I'm hoping, will be painting up some of the stuff that I've got. Now there's another reason for the delay with Bexhill West, and that leads me on to the new project that I had mentioned. It became clear to me when I did my last sort of extensive batch of track building that the 10-plot plug track really was getting to a point where it was going to be entirely usable, and I've been spending a lot of time experimenting just with plug track and what it can do and what it can't do, really thinking about Bexhill West. And because one of the great things about it is I have a lot more time in front of my computer than I do kind of hands-on modelling time, and the great thing about plug track is you can design it all on the computer. So I wanted to sort of test plug track out. Now about a year ago it coincided with the announcement of the Scale 4 Society's Jubilee Layout Challenge, and I thought what better opportunity to put plug track to good use and have a go at producing something for the Jubilee Layout Challenge. Now some of you know all about this and know what my entry for that is going to be, so I thought what I would do just briefly here is show you exactly what I've come up with, where I've got with it to date, because that has undoubtedly sort of been a distraction, particularly over the last few months. Now because of that I've kind of got a need to create some rolling stock that is outside of really my South Eastern and Chatham Railway interest. So some of the things I'm going to show you next are all Midland Railway themed, because my entry for the Jubilee Layout Challenge will have a Midland Railway theme. So what I'll do is I'll show you some images off my computer screen to give you a flavour of what that's all about, talk about where it's going, where I've got to with it, and what's been going on. I have been busy. Now then, when I first thought about applying plug track to the Jubilee Layout Challenge, I didn't want to get involved in meticulously researching a particular location and producing something that was absolutely spot on. I thought I'd cut some corners and I'd just pick something from this wonderful book by the late Ian Rice. It's full of all sorts of interesting ideas for different locations and suggestions of how they might be modelled, and the one that caught my fancy was right at the back of the book, navigation sidings. So I thought I would just copy this, and then nobody could tell me I've got things wrong because I would have been following someone else's design. However, I ran into some problems, the main one being I couldn't physically fit all of the track geometry into the space that's available. Now, one of the things about the Scale 4 Society's Layout Challenge is that it has to fit within an 18.83 square feet footprint, and whilst I could kind of make this work, I couldn't get all the track to fit. However, I was quite taken with this particular idea because it incorporated lots of ideas that I knew I'd never get the chance to model at Bexhill West, and so really that's what took my fancy. So what I'm about to show you on my computer screen is a kind of a, well, bears no resemblance to this whatsoever, but it's after 29 attempts it's developed into what I'm about to show you. But what I am keen to do is on my finished model is incorporate all those features that took my fancy on this particular Ian Rice plan. So let's have a look at where we're at. So then what you can see here is the final arrangement that I've come up with, and as I said before, it bears no resemblance to Ian Rice's plan at all. As I've developed and refined it, things have changed. Also, there's some features on here which weren't on the Ian Rice original. You could say I've overcomplicated it somewhat, and there's lots of reasons for it. Let me just rotate this image around a bit so we get a better kind of view of the three-dimensional nature of it. So you can see we've got two levels. The top level incorporates a station and a very small sorting yard. There's not really much in the way of sidings as such. The idea with these is this will be a staging yard to receive goods in which will be coming from a quarry or a colliery or something on the lower level, and there'll be a wagon hoist here, we'll look at that in just a minute, which will elevate the full wagons where they'll be staged and depart, and empties will come back and the process will repeat. Now, when discussing this with a friend of mine initially, it was like, well, you know, what time period and what railway company, etc, etc. Now, my first sort of interest is the South Eastern and Chatham. However, I'm really quite interested in the locomotives of Samuel Johnson of the Midland Railway, and it turns out that one of the chaps in our club was similarly interested in those, so he kindly volunteered he's going to build some of the stock to run on this particular layout, which is good. That saves me a lot of aggravation, but that was why it's developed into something with a Midland theme. So whilst I know people are going to look at this and say it's completely unprototypical, etc, etc, this is an excuse for Greg and I to build some Midland stock and have some fun making something upon which they can run. So I'll just zoom in a little bit. I'll save all of this and we'll look at it sort of more fully in a future video. But what I will say is this image you're looking at here is kind of my digital sketchboard where I'm sort of testing ideas out and experimenting with things. So there are some things that you'll see on here. For example, if I zoom in here, you'll see some bits that don't line up and things that look wrong. That's because I've been experimenting and still am experimenting with how I want things to look. So don't look at the detail as such, but just hopefully this gives you an overall impression of what this thing is going to become. So then, as I mentioned, we'll have goods coming in here over the canal where goods will be staged before they ascend a wagon hoist here to be staged. We've got a small station. I wasn't going to include a station, but Greg suggested it and I was able to fit it in, so why not? So this will be served by the Midland Railway, but we're going to give the Great Northern Railway operating rights, and so the Great Northern will run into this bay platform. That's an excuse to have some nice green engines and some teak coaches. This is about making something that is entertaining rather than historically accurate in any way. So that's the basic thing. If I flip this around, you'll see the construction. So this is all plywood, lots of space underneath to get bits and pieces in. It's relatively lightweight, and it is exactly in plan 18.83 square feet. I decided that rather than seeing that as an upper limit, I'd see if I could get it absolutely spot on, and when I run the numbers through the computer it is exactly to the correct size. So there's going to be a fiddle yard on the end here, a turntable here, which reminds me of the turntable controller. The controller is, you may remember this from a video a while back, has been kind of redesigned. That's going to be in a video very soon. So we've got electronic control of the turntable here, and also the wagon hoist. I mentioned the wagon hoist, and here is the mock-up of it. Now interestingly, this mock-up has been 3D printed in stainless steel. This element obviously needs to work for the whole layout to function, to be able to shuffle the wagons backwards and forwards. So I wanted something that was nice and rigid that I could use to build the mechanism and get it all working properly. Eventually this will be remade in sort of fine section brass and hopefully will look a bit better, but for now it's quite an interesting little piece in its own right. So the next few shots show where I'm at with the layout. The track was all built with laser cut ply timbering and all assembled as per the plug track kind of specifications. It was all really good, very pleased with it. However, I ripped it all up and decided to have a go at doing it with FDM timbering. So what you see here is the 3D FDM printed timbering. Now there's nothing wrong with the laser cut stuff, it looked amazing, but it occurred to me that all of this is going to be covered anyway, you're not going to see it. Even the main running line is going to have boxed in timbering, so I thought the whole project was about experimenting with plug track, so I thought why not take the opportunity whilst I could and see what it would be like building with the FDM timbering. And the FDM stuff is excellent. Like I say, nothing wrong with the laser cut stuff, it looked amazing. I just thought I'd try something else whilst I had the chance. So then, to wrap up, let's come back to the workbench. And I'd mentioned in that last segment that I was quite interested in Samuel Johnson's locomotives, and I'm putting together a Midland spinner here. Now this is still very much a work in progress, and you can see I've got some substitute wheels on the front bogie there just for now, but this has been coming together quite nicely. This is from a London Road models kit, and there's the tender. Now I have made my own temporary chassis for this, so I'm reluctant to show you underneath, but I will, why not. I've put some springing on here. Now if we have a look in there, you can see it's all not very elegant. This really was just about figuring out how I wanted this to work, so there will be some improvements to be made to that, but I've got a bit of a dilemma. I can foresee this thing, just like the real thing, tending to slip, so I'm considering, and this goes against the grain a little bit, I can't believe I'm saying this on YouTube, but I'm seriously considering driving this from the tender. Now that instinctively feels all wrong, but I think it might produce something which just works a little bit better. So if you're watching this and you've any experience of driving one of these things via the driving axle, then do please let me know, and hopefully in the not too distant future I'll have this finished. I'm looking forward to painting this one. It's going to be an absolute nightmare, but I'm looking forward to painting it all the same. So that's nearly complete. Now I'd mentioned that my friend Greg had kindly volunteered to produce some of the stock for the challenge layout. Well, that's really good of him, but I don't want to take advantage, so I've been putting together one or two little kits that I might as well show you whilst we're here. So then, this is a Diagram 529 brake van, nearly finished, and that will be another one for the paint shop. And to go with it, we've got Parcels Van 2. There's some staining on these that was on the original etch. I'll polish that out before I paint them. And again, I'm looking forward to painting these, but it's going to be an absolute nightmare, I'm sure. But anyway, it'd be good fun little exercise. So I've just thought of something else to mention whilst you're here and I've got your attention. This is one of my turnout actuators, and I have been producing these for a while now in 7mm scale. Now the 7mm ones are adjustable, so you could take drive pins up to the switches and they are adjustable for different gauges, for scale 7 and OMF and what have you. But I've thought that really the FDM print is a better solution for these things. They're incredibly robust, take a little bit longer for me to print, but it does mean that I can incorporate these nice little, I don't know if you can just see it there, little brass inserts that hold the drive pins. Now this one is set up with 2 drive pins to take, here we go, these are the little bits that make up and solder onto the turnout switches. Now these bits don't come with it, but they're very easy to make. I'll show you how to make them in perhaps in my next video. But the reason why I mention this is now going to be the standard version on my website. I'll still have the other ones listed, and whilst the stocks last they'll be available from stock, but these will be the new version going forward, simply because I think they're better. Now these ones are set up with the drive pins at 17.5mm spacing, so I could change that. I can move them in and out, so perhaps for 00 it could be a little bit closer than that. But anyway, just a sort of a heads up that these things are now changing on the website. Again, I'll put a link in the description below. And with that, I think that pretty much wraps it up. There's lots more that I could be talking about, but I'll save showing those for another time. This video is long enough as it is. Hope you're all well, and I'll see you next time. Cheerio.